How many fucking times have we had this conversation on this channel? So many times. I just always feel like I want to talk about it because this is like one of the areas of conversation that like genuinely annoys me. So I'm going to say a couple things before I jump into like this video. And if you've watched me and followed me for a while, you completely already know half of what I'm going to say in this video because I've done like 20 different live broadcasts about this. But I don't know, like my life always changes every time I do it. Like when I first started talking about it, I was in a relationship. I think the last time I talked about it, I was coming out of my relationship. Now I'm dating and I'm single, and I have dated men or tried to date men who didn't quite like trans women, but were willing to sort of try and figure it out. And I have different opinions. So maybe there's a slightly different, I don't know, maybe there's a slightly different conversation I have every time, but let's just fucking get into it. So, because I know most of you are not going to sit here and watch the likely hour-long video I'm about to do about this, I'm going to just say this. I do not think, okay, let's put this right up front. Let's just put this right up front so that if you don't want to listen to what I'm going to say for the next couple of hours, you'll at least hear this. I do not think that not dating a trans person makes you inherently transphobic. I don't think that. I'm not interested in defending that point or that argument. What I am going to say is that I don't think that not wanting to date a trans person makes you transphobic. Now, the reason why I have to put that up front is because in the past, I've done videos where I've talked about this. One of the big reasons why I'm talking about this right now is because every so often there's a video that comes into my feed, and it's one of like the 3 response videos to my work that I've ever watched. And the reason why I don't watch a lot of response videos is for the reason, like, see how many times I've talked about this? See how many times I've done videos like this? I know myself. I know how I am. I almost can't help myself from continuing to make content discussing why the person who responded to my content got it wrong. It's just good for me not to watch these videos. There have been some response videos that I've watched that have made really good points that I've been like, okay, this is a decent point. I didn't maybe look at things from this perspective. Then there are other response videos, most of the ones that I watch, which is there's only 3 of them I watch, that are just completely straw manning and ignoring or overlooking or misunderstanding my argument. Sometimes I believe purposefully. Now, I made a video on my YouTube channel where the introduction of the video is me talking about how I used to feel, the thought processes that I used to have when it came to people who rejected me on the basis of me being transgender. Then I went into my larger conclusion and how I feel now, which is that I'm just not interested in convincing anyone that I'm worth it. And that relationships with people who actually like transgender people are far more fulfilling, are far more healthy, are far better. And if you guys have watched a couple of my previous videos when I talk about dating and stuff, you guys know that I'm very resistant to a power imbalance in relationships. I'm very resistant to that. And that comes to a lot of stuff. That comes to money, status, etc. But for me, one of the biggest ones is I do not like being in relationships with people who their interest in trans people is so important and contingent to them being able to be in a relationship with me that they have all the deciding power in terms of like how this relationship can go, right? I don't like being in relationships like that. And for that reason, I tend to not date men who are inexperienced with trans women, who don't like trans women, but make me the exception. I don't have relationships like that because those relationships ultimately lead absolutely nowhere, right? Bigger aspect to understand about me personally and my personality, right? I've always been someone who believes that most people are not going to like me. When you understand that you are different than most people, and you guys have to understand and remember that I grew up in a predominantly non-Black community. I grew up not being thin. I grew up not being seen as desirable. I grew up with an atypical gender expression. I'm very used to people just not being into me, right? I'm very, very used to people just not being into me. And so I don't really go across this world. I don't really navigate across the world being someone who believes that someone owes me anything. I don't feel that way. I ultimately have this mindset of people are going to perhaps inherently find me unattractive, inherently find me unappealing. And that's just how it is, and that's life, right? Now, with that all being said, one of the slight annoyances that I have with some of the conversations other people have about my attraction or my relationships or my ability to date is just how completely different and opposite it is to the real life experiences that I have. Now, despite being somebody who walks through the world believing that, you know, I don't think that everyone's going to find me attractive, that I don't believe that most people are going to find me attractive, I get a lot of attention wherever I fucking go, you know? A lot of people seem to find me attractive. A lot of people seem to be interested in me. I'm polyamorous. I date a lot of people. I had a date yesterday. You guys have been here when I've been sitting on here doing my makeup to go on fucking dates. Like, I go on a lot of dates, and I don't come here with any sort of need to prove anything to you. I'm talking about my life. I'm just sort of venting about my experiences and what I've gone through. I don't need to prove to you or tell you, you know, look how impressive I am. I have these dates. I'm not doing that. I'm really not interested in doing that. I don't feel like that does anything, right? I don't need you to be impressed by how many dates I go on for me to feel like a valid person. It's just not where I'm coming from at all, right? But that all being said, especially being single, young, successful, I have a lot of success in dating. I've had a lot of failures in dating, but I have a lot of success in dating. I don't struggle to find men who are attracted to me. I just don't. I don't struggle to find men who are attracted to me at a very superficial level. And of course, finding men who are attracted to me at a deeper level, you know, is a little bit more complicated. But I'm really not someone who's out here who feels rejected or discarded or unwanted or unloved, or someone who, I'm not that person. I'm really not. Half the time you guys have heard me talk about going out, half the time I'm talking about people who just won't leave me the fuck alone. It's very common for me to go out and people just fucking fawn over me and they just keep grabbing at me and they just keep talking. And that's not me saying this to you to impress you, right? Sometimes I just want to go out and just be left alone. You know, I know that sounds weird, but I work from home. And so I have like this constant need to like get out of the house. And living in Los Angeles now, there's a shitload of events that I can go to. And so I don't really have, I don't think I go out for the reasons most people go to. You guys know I went on that date with that guy the other day, the guy that I met at the poly meetup that I go to. One of the things he said to me that was interesting, or not one of the things he said, one of the things he impressed on me rather, is that, you know, when he goes to these poly meetups, he's going there looking at this space as like a dating space, right? He looks at those poly meetups as like a space where you come to meet people to potentially go on dates with, right? I look at it as social hour, meeting people who are in a similar experience as I am, making new friends, having conversations with people, you know, who are similar to me. You know, that's how I look at it. I've been asked out twice, and yeah, I know that there are men that are there that are attracted to me. But at the same time, I don't really look at it as like, this is my dating hour. Do you know what I mean? But some people do, and that's fine, but I'm not someone who thinks that way. Probably because I already have too much on my plate romantically and socially to like necessarily want to go to a place to find a person, right? But anyway, you guys know that I recently just had a situation where I had a guy who asked me out on a date at the poly meetup, first guy, and he did not know that I was transgender until like an hour before we went on our date. And then we went out for a couple of months, all predicated on this idea that maybe, you know, maybe he will figure out how he likes trans women based on dating me, right? Because he has actually a transgender daughter. He has a lot of trans friends. He is very trans positive on his Facebook page and on his different social medias and stuff like that. But he was just not totally and completely sure how he would really feel dating a trans woman, right? And having sex with a trans woman. He knew that he was attracted to me, but he just wasn't sure where that could go, right? And so we dated for a while. And there were a lot of misfires. There were a lot of miscommunications. There's a lot of assumptions on my end, and there are a lot of assumptions on his end. And we just realized that we weren't really a good fit dating wise. We could still be friends, but we weren't really a good fit dating wise. And some of you guys know or have heard the broadcast I did about liberal hypocrites, is because one of the issues I had with him was that he was the first person to sit up and yell at people for not validating trans people's genders. Now, granted, he has a transgender daughter, so maybe this is part of it, right? But he still had a hard time seeing my gender as valid, right? You say that you're attracted to women, you say that you see me as a woman, but you can't fuck me, right? And that is the exact situation I don't want to be in. And I gave him a lot of leeway because we're in the same circles, we go to the same clubs, we're in the same poly meetups. So I gave him a lot of leeway, right? But at the end of the day, I ended up slapping myself in the face and being like, I have this rule of not dating men who don't like transgender women. And I dated this guy who was still trying to see it, because his whole thing was like, he wanted to date me and he wanted to figure it out, but he didn't want to be problematic, right? So he wanted to essentially be able to, like date me and then have a situation where maybe we did have sex and he could say, you know what, this just isn't for me, and then be seen as not problematic. A lot of his reasons for dating me, a lot of his whole thing was like him trying to figure himself out. Now, in the video that I made on my main channel, I talk about the feelings I had early on, right? The feelings I had with when I was being rejected by men who were attracted to me but could not accept that I was transgender. Now, when you have a lack of dating experience, now anyone out there who has ever been romantic, who has ever dated, who has ever tried to pursue any sort of relationship, I'm pretty sure you've had this experience, right? When you're at the very beginning of dating, the very start of dating, you don't know what the fuck you're doing, right? You really don't know what the fuck you're doing, right? You're guessing, you're figuring it out. You don't quite know. There's such a question mark, and you're gonna fuck up. You're gonna fuck up, right? You're going to fuck up. Okay. And so for me, a lot of my early fuck ups was me sitting there and sort of trying to convince a guy that I was worth it, right? I would say shit like, I give the best head, I'm going to treat you better than she's going to, I do this, I do that, da 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 da. It would be all this stuff, right, that put me in a position where I was the one begging and he was the one deciding, right? I was the one begging and he was the one deciding. And so what would happen in a lot of these situations, right? Sometimes the guys would say, no, it's just really not my thing. I'm not interested. I'm so sorry. Goodbye. Sometimes they would say, well, you know what? Hey, I'm here. I'm horny. Let me try it. Let me figure out how I feel about it. And then they would freak out midway, right? And then they'd rush out of the room. I mean, there were so many situations I had when I was younger, and I was with men who didn't quite like trans women, but were willing to try it, who midway, they freaked out. I mean, I had this situation where this guy, I'm not going to get into the details of what we did, but he wanted me to do some shit that I really didn't want to do. And so I kind of made a little bit of a compromise with him. And he freaked out, right? He had to call me a taxi. He had to get me home, because even though he had like all of this, even though he had all these ideas of what he wanted and how he wanted it to be, the reality was too scary for him. So he freaked the fuck out. He freaked the fuck out. And I've had those experiences so often with men who don't quite like trans women. And when you're in that situation, right? When you're in that space, it's hard for you not to internalize that. It's hard for you not to look at a guy who's in a room because he's so freaked out about what he just did and not internalize that in a negative way. And so for me, it became very clear to me that my happiest relationships were not going to be with men who didn't really know what they wanted, right? And even though I said all this to myself, we talked about this on my other broadcast, I've had this weird thing where I try to tell myself, girl, you're up here and you should never lower yourself down here. But recently I've lowered myself down here because I've wanted to sort of make things work. Not out of any sort of desperation or any sort of like, oh my God, I just really need to figure this out. But more of just like, you know what, I want to be able to see where this goes. And with a lot of people, you know, I do that because I'm going to be in their same space, right? I mean, with the guy that I just went on a date with a couple days ago, I said yes to him because we're going to be at the same poly meetups. Just like the first guy, we're going to be at the same poly meetups. He's going to see me all the time. He's a very friendly person. I want to maintain some sort of relationship with him. And if we're interested in each other and we're mutually attracted, let's see where it goes, right? That was my mindset, right? Now, I don't know if I don't remember if I ever really got around to telling you guys why I was going to tell that guy that I was transgender, but I didn't ultimately, because realistically, I was looking for one thing. He was really more looking for someone who was open to have sexy time with him from time to time and also maybe get some drinks, right? Which is not what I'm looking for. And so him knowing that I was transgender was almost irrelevant at that point because we weren't looking for the same thing. Like, it didn't really matter that I was trans because we weren't going to see each other after this, right? It wasn't relevant. And there have been times in my past where I've gone out on dates with guys who did not know that I was trans. I don't do that. Well, I tend not to do that anymore. And we went on one date and we realized we just really weren't looking for the same thing. And so me being trans wasn't really worth it, you know? And mind you, I paid for all the drinks on this date. So this was not even a situation where like he spent a lot of money. Like I fucking I fucking took an Uber all the way out there. I paid for all of our drinks, you know, and he lived 10 minutes away. So this was not a situation where he like wasted money on me. You know, I paid for everything. These broke men out here, I tell you. Boy, I can't wait to redo my hair. I feel like I should just lock myself in my fucking room and redo my hair for the next week. Because it's really getting there and it's starting to aggravate me. But anyway, so going back to the guy who, you know, we ultimately concluded, hey, you know, I'm just not into trans women. Do I think that guy's transphobic? Not really. You know, and see what was annoying to me about that particular response video that was made about that is that I basically say everything I'm saying in this video in that video, right? I know that most people don't have the patience to watch. This is an 18-minute video already. The video I made on my channel I think is like 7 minutes. I know people don't have all the time in the day to listen to a nuanced position on this, right? But I don't think that guy is inherently transphobic, right? The thing I do talk about in that video is that a lot of us are raised with these sort of cookie cutter images of what our possibilities in relationships are, right? What we could possibly do in relationships. So, and most of us are raised with this idea being impressed on us that the only type of relationships that we can have are heterosexual relationships, right? A lot of lesbian women go through this where they go through life believing that this is just how they're supposed to be, right? And then they realize, oh, wait, I like women. Holy fucking shit, I like women. And this is why I've never had healthy and good relationships with men. But because they've never seen healthy relationships between two women, they spent a lot of time on autopilot just dating these men because they felt like that's what they were supposed to do, right? And I think that when it comes to trans people, see, there's an understanding that I have as a trans person who has dated a lot of people, who has been around for over 10 years as a trans person, that most cis people are never going to get. That's why I often say that I believe that trans people have evolved beyond cis people's understandings, because there are just some things that trans people know that cis people will probably never come to know unless they listen to trans people speak, which the vast majority of them do not give a fuck enough to actually do that, right? What I've realized in my life is that there are so many men who their initial reaction and rejection of trans women comes from what they've been taught is their only option, right? Because I've had personal experiences with men who met me in a very organic way, found out that I was trans, freaked the fuck out. We lost contact. And the next time I talk to them, they've got a full on relationship with a trans woman, right? For some people, for some men, it does take meeting a trans person and understanding that they are not a concept or a theoretical situation or, just this, or drawing on the fucking internet, to understand that maybe they could date a trans person. And I think that when it came to this guy that I was dating, I know that for him, yes, he's known trans people, yes, he's met trans people, but I was the first trans person he met where he was like, oh, I could maybe date her. I could maybe date her, because he was attracted to me as a woman, and the trans thing was sort of like an after thing, right? And so he had to kind of go through his little journey with me to figure out what he liked, to really get to a point in conclusion where he realized it wasn't what he wanted, right? Now, if you've listened to my many broadcasts and my many rants about this, you know that I'm not interested in being any man's experiment. I'm not interested in being any man's, figuring out type of person. I'm just really not interested in that. I like men who know what they want, who know what they like, and aren't going to waste my fucking time, right? For example, now I don't want to get too deep into this because you guys, if you watched my last broadcast, you know I had a date last night, and bitch, he left 2 hours ago. he left 2 hours ago, right? Um, and this was a guy who, he was pansexual. He's dated trans women, before, several. And so when we went on a date, it was a date, right? It was not, because a lot of times when you go out with men who don't know anything about trans women, or have never dated trans women, what your date ends up being is a 20 questions session. When did you know? How long have you been on hormones? How much surgery have you had? When did you figure out that you were transgender? It's like all of this stuff, it ends up being like an interrogation. And so it doesn't even matter who you two are as people. It's all about him figuring things out about you as a trans person, right? And it's funny because I talked about this the other day with one of my friends. It was like, when I look back at the men that I dated back in the day when I was still in that sort of, let me explain myself to you, let me convince you that I'm worth it sort of phase, like, fuck, one of the guys I was dating, this is a guy that I was upset. I talked about this guy several times, but this is one of the guys I was dating. I was so upset about that relationship not working out. I was so hurt by him not being my boyfriend, and him not taking me seriously, and I was so hurt, right? I cried so many fucking nights for this guy, right? I go on his Facebook page today, and he's got a fucking Make America Great Again hat, right? He's got a fucking Make America Great Again hat on his head. And it's like, when you're in that situation that I was in, where you're dating men who really don't get along with you as a person, but are just fascinated with you as a trans person, or are trying to figure themselves out as a person who's attracted to trans women, like, you're not really dating men who actually like you as a person. You're dating men who are trying to figure out how they feel about your body. And that's a very unhealthy circle to be in, right? A lot of the guys I look at who I used to date way back in the day, one guy who I dated, who I really, really thought was just a great guy and was really, really cute and all that stuff. I go on his Facebook page today. He's got all types of hunting photos with him holding up deer and shit. He's got a bunch of anti-Hillary memes and shit. Like, he's all the way off of the deep end of like what I wanted as a person who was with me. Because back then, it was not about us interacting with each other as people. It was not about us interacting with each other as two people in a relationship trying to figure out where we were going. It was about them being into trans women, me being a trans woman who was available and maybe didn't have standards that said, I'm not going to deal with these types of people. And that's where it was, right? And so, and I'm reading a comment right now. It says they usually won't take you out in public too. They usually hit you up at 3 a.m. when they want a nut. Now, my experience initially was like that with men. My experience initially with men was like that. But as I grew and as I became more passable and shit, men loved to take me out. I've had a lot of men love taking me out. In fact, there's a guy, I will never forget this. So I often talk about the guy that I dated that was like 4 or 5, right? He was really, really short, but he was really, really cute. Um, and I remember he took me out to a restaurant, right? Um, and he would listen to how the waitress would talk to me, and he would listen to how everyone around us would talk to us. And he was so fascinated by the fact that no one around us at the time knew that I was transgender, right? He was so fascinated with that. And I remember some of my dates being like that, where it was so much less about um it was so much less about us interacting again as people, right? It was so much less about us developing a relationship with each other as people. It was about the novelty of being with someone who's transgender. It was about the novelty of being able to sit out in public with a trans woman and not have anyone know what was going on. Like, but back then I felt I didn't really, you would not have been able to tell me I deserved better. I thought, oh, he's taking me out in public. That's what I thought. You know what I mean? That's what I thought. That's where I was at the time. Now, as I get older and as I date more and as I've had significant relationships, I kind of have a standard for how I want to be fucking treated. And I'm not going to go out on a date with a guy who's just fascinated with me being trans and wants to sit there and just look and ogle at the fact that no one knows, right? There are some men like trans women for various different reasons, right? Some men like the idea of being with someone having their special little secrets. Some men are like that. Other men like trans women because they view them as the best of both worlds. They see this hyper feminine creature who has, in their view, a more male masculine sex drive. Some men really like the visual of knowing that they're turning their partner on, and that's why they like trans women, right? Some men just see trans women as women and will treat them and date them as they would any other woman. And those are the guys that I like to date. But those guys, right? Those guys usually take a lot of stress and heartbreak, and they go on long ass journeys before they're able to even be at the point where I need them to be, right? Like my ex was a fucking sociology major. My ex fucking went to college and learned about trans. He went to fucking college and learned about trans people. Most men are not like that. Most men are not like that. Most men, right? And so for me, I recognize that who I'm going to actually be able to date, who I'm going to actually like, who I'm actually going to be able to develop a relationship with, is a very, 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 very small pool of people. But I would rather be with someone who I don't have to convince them I'm worthy than someone who is able to already know that I'm worthy. We already get that we're valid, but now let's see how we get along, right? Now let's see how we get along, right? That to me is more of what I'm invested in, which is why I'm really not a person who really sees the point in having these long arguments and debates with people about what someone rejecting them means. I look at it like this. I look at people rejecting trans people as romantic partners, as I do a lot of other things, right? It takes a lot for men to get to the point where they get trans people. Unlike a lot of people who what was I gonna say? Um I totally lost my train of thought because I was banning someone from the fucking chat room. Um what was I gonna fucking say? I just don't believe in saying that, right? I want men who like trans women. That is how I feel. That is where I'm at. That's all I'm interested in. I don't want to convince anyone. I'm too fucking busy. I'm too fucking cute. I have too much going for me. Why do I have to beg you? Why do I have to beg you? You know what I mean? Why do I, that's just, that's how I feel. Why the fuck do I have to beg you? Right? And so I will say one of the things that I'm going through right now is I'm trying to meet more people in my real life, in my, three-dimensional world. And that maybe complicates the whole telling a guy that I'm trans thing, because even though I am a trans person, I find that to be a very hard thing for me to just put it to the front of describing who I am, because it's not a very large part of who I am, to be honest. I know how cis people see trans people being transgender as like the most interesting thing about them. But for me, I don't see that as the case. I don't. I don't. I really don't. For me, it's like I'm trans, but that was almost something that happened a long time ago. I'm still trans, obviously, but it's not an important thing for me to bring up. It's just not. It's really not. It was at one point, but it's not an important thing for me to bring up. So that's kind of made me meeting men in the real world a little more complicated. But on all my dating profiles, I say straight up, I'm trans. And if you aren't into that, leave me the fuck alone. Leave me the fuck alone. Because I don't want to have to be in a situation where I have to convince someone. That's just not how I want to live my fucking life. It just really isn't. It really fucking isn't. Life is too fucking short. And maybe it's because I live in California, where I really feel this way. Maybe if I lived in a different state, I would maybe feel very differently about this. But I just don't see the point. I really do not see the point of sitting there and groveling for love. I just don't. I really don't. I truly and honestly don't. Anyway, fuck. Did I say everything I wanted to say already? I said that really efficiently. So I don't think that people. So this is what I was gonna say. I look at people rejecting trans people in the same way that I looked at people not understanding the reality of what racism is, right? It's going to take you a really long time, a lot of studying, a lot of experiences to really know, right? Like you can have like a vague understanding, but to really know, it's going to actually require you to do some work. And every man that I've dated who I've had really good relationship dynamics with, it's been because they've done work. It's not been because they just threw their hands up and was like, yeah, I guess I'll try this. It's because they've done work to understand trans people, right? And so I know that I don't think the person who is against trans people, or is not against trans people, who isn't interested in trans people, is inherently a bad person. I really don't. I don't think that they're inherently a bad person. I don't think that they are a bigoted person. I think that they're often a person who has never been presented the option of dating a trans person. And because of that, having a conception of what that would be like is too much, right? It's too much. Because oftentimes I will have men who say, look, you're perfect in every single way. I just can't get over you being trans, right? And some of those men who have said that to me have later reached out to me down the line and said, well, let's see. Like I've said, I've had men who met me organically, right? Who like, fuck, I told you guys about this guy who I met on OkCupid years ago, right? This is a guy who, I'm not going to put his business out there, but he had his own issues going on. And we connected, and he read my profile, and he really, really liked me. But he basically said, look, I think you're great, but I don't think I can date a trans person. I don't, just not really my thing, right? And over the years, we've very sporadically kept in touch. Over the years, we've, said hi here and there. I've seen his posts. I've seen him working. He's an actor. I've seen him get certain roles, and I've been like, good for you. And the last time we talked, he was talking about how he loves trans women now. And not only does he love trans women, but he's a fucking bottom. But that wasn't where he was when he met me. And maybe meeting me and watching me over the years made him understand things about trans people that he didn't get before, right? Because trans people weren't real to him. Trans people were not a real, embodiment to him, and I remember when I was young and I really wanted to date him, I was really bummed that it didn't fucking work out. Now I don't want to date him because he's a fucking bottom. Right? Now I don't want to date him because he's a bottom. And but now he likes trans women, and it took him meeting trans people to really get to that point. Right. And so if I think anything is transphobic, right? If I think anything is transphobic, I think it's how trans women are omitted from conversations about dating. That's really the only thing I think is transphobic. By pretending that trans people are not in the dating pool, by pretending that people don't date trans people, by not presenting representations of transgender people in romantic situations, I think that's transphobic. And I think that if we had more of that, I think if we had more representations of healthy relationships between trans women and cis men, or trans people, trans men and trans women, or those types of situations, I think more people would be able to say, "Oh, that's me. Oh, I guess I could do that." Or, "Oh, I'm curious about that. I want to see how I feel about this." Right? And once we have that, I think we'll be able to move towards more of an understanding position. Now, listen, y'all remember I was single 5-6 years ago, right? 5-6 years ago, I was single. Dating now, dating now in the age of the Janet Mocks and the Laverne Cox and the Carmen Carreras and all the various different transgender representations that we now have accessible to us has been so much fucking easier. Let me fucking tell you guys, there are so many more men who are attracted to and interested in trans women today than there were when I was dating 6 years ago. Right? So many more. So many more. So many more. I remember when I was on OkCupid, I used to have a profile that said female on it. And I used to have to say, well, sometimes I said, sometimes I didn't say that I was transgender and this is the situation, da, da, da. And I would get so many gross and mean messages, right? Now I'm able to put transgender woman in my profile and I get a lot of very pleasant messages, right? The world has changed, and with representation, people have been able to sort of see that there are these other options in terms of dating, in terms of relationships, in terms of love. But us not having those representations makes it, but it's a big question mark around what these relationships are. Listen, I've dated way too many men who I know have not gone and told their friends and family about me being transgender, right? But I know that had they done that and had they been able to see us dating and being relatively normal, they might have been able to say, you know what, this isn't as weird as I thought it was. Or maybe I want to try that, or maybe I'm curious about that. I've talked to men who their friend was dating a trans woman and they were like, well, let me see where this goes, kind of thing. Like, that to me is, if we talk about something being transphobic, that is the only thing I think is transphobic. That the lack of representation of transgender people in romantic relationships. That's it. That's it. I don't think someone saying, no, I don't want to date you because you're trans is necessarily transphobic. I see how people can see it that way. I really do. But I don't really think that that word is worth attaching to that situation. I dated a guy for a couple of months who ultimately rejected me because I was a trans woman. Do I think he's transphobic? Not really. I think he has a lot of work to do and a lot of growth to do. And I don't think that that makes him inherently transphobic. I really, truly, and honestly don't. I really, truly, and honestly don't. Because we have such a lack of representation of transgender women in relationships, whenever you hear about a trans woman who was killed by a man, everyone thinks, oh, he must have she must have tricked him, she must have fooled him, she must have gone. I saw a comment earlier that was like, said something along the lines of, any trans woman who, does something with a man, without, telling him deserves a rape charge and deserves to be fucking killed, right? No, what really happens in most of those cases where you hear is they knew that they were trans, they accepted that they were trans, right? They embraced that they were trans, but maybe the trans girl wanted more than that. Maybe the trans girl wanted people to know. Maybe they, what? And then they committed violence against them. Or another situation where, much like every other woman, Much like every other woman, trans women experience intimate partner violence as well. When you really dig into these cases, guys, when you really dig into these cases, these are not situations of trans women fooling and tricking men into sleeping with them. These are likely, more often than not, men who like trans women who had a negative reaction to someone knowing, or to her wanting more than what he was willing to give her, or just committing intimate partner violence like a lot of men do women all the time. Trans women are particularly vulnerable because no one views trans people as rapeable, violatable, or valid, right? So a man can go and abuse a trans woman who oftentimes is going through a myriad of other issues. And if she goes to the police, I mean, there's been so many situations where trans women have gone through some sort of abusive thing. They've gone to the police and they just assume that they're an escort and that this is the result of their job. And well, maybe if you didn't want that to happen to you, you shouldn't have done that, right? These are things that really happen. These are things that really, 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 really happen. But the narrative, because no one believes that trans people have relationships, because no one believes that trans people can have sex with someone without tricking and fooling them, because trans people are so dirty and undesirable, that you're never going to actually be able to see these for what these situations really are. And that's what's a little aggravating for me. I think that lack of representation is transphobic. I really do. That's what I think is transphobic. And you know what? A lot of these people who always act like what I'm saying and what other people are saying are just like these attacks on heterosexuals and these attacks. These are the same people. These are the same people who are afraid of seeing trans people represented, are afraid of seeing gay people represented, are afraid of seeing anything other than a cis heterosexual relationship being represented, because they know that when representation is there, people can see themselves reflected and maybe understand that maybe that's them too, right? Maybe that's them too. And so to act like, this is, because what's aggravating to me is I've lived my life, I'm 27 years old. I transitioned when I was 16, y'all. Like I've lived my life, right? And I have so much more life to live. So much more life to live, right? So much more. I've learned and seen so many things, right? And what I've come to understand is that my life and my experiences are completely alien to the average cis person who doesn't have trans friends, who doesn't listen to trans people. And that's most people. So they're always going to sit around and have their own ideas and understandings of what these things are, whereas I'm going to sit over here just knowing what the case is, right? And unfortunately, because they outnumber me, they're always going to be able to carry the narrative. They're always going to be the people who are defining what is and what isn't. And that's fucked up. That's fucked up, So anyway, I feel like I've basically said everything I want to say. I'm going to go and read through comments and see if there's anything I have to go off of. I saw someone commenting and I wanted to see what they were saying, but I was too deep in my shit. Luckily all the comments are still here. Not currently dating a trans person doesn't make one transphobic. The only time one is transphobic in regards to not dating trans people is when they refuse to date trans people solely because they're trans. I don't know if I agree with that. I can see how people can feel like that's transphobic. I really do. But I think some people, I don't know. Because I think what it is for me is I look at a lot of the way that people are socialized and say, all right, you just weren't presented these options. And am I going to really hold you accountable for how you've been wired and how you've learned to be? Most men, in my experience, who date trans women are men who identify as straight, who have had to go through a ton of growing and unlearning and changing before they're able to treat a trans woman with common decency and respect, right? A lot of them, most of them. And when I see where those men end up, is it really, I don't know, fair for me to point at that person and say, well, you're transphobic? I really don't think so. I think it's very unfair to believe that everyone is going, like I said, I go through the world understanding that not everyone's going to get me, not everyone's going to like me, not everyone's going to be attracted to me. I think it's very unreasonable to think that the vast majority of people are walking around with an understanding of trans people enough to be able to see them as valid partners. Because representation is so fucking shitty, some people don't even believe trans people exist. Some people don't even believe that trans people even fucking exist. Right? And so, still, even though there's representation, some people just don't even believe they fucking exist. Right? And so, I don't think that ignorance makes you bigoted. I don't. I think most of the times that's ignorance. I think most of the time, not all the time, but that's ignorance. Because obviously, if you were attracted to me, you're attracted to trans people, right? But it takes more for you to maybe work through how you feel about a trans person's body, and you might land on absolutely definitively no, and you might land on absolutely definitively yes. I don't know how helpful it is to call these people transphobic, and I don't really agree. But that's me. Sabrina says my analogy would be a straight girl or gay guy would not want to date or fuck women. Does that make them that doesn't make them misogynistic? But if that straight girl or gay guy kept making videos about how gross boobs or vaginas are, I think they have a problem with women. I would agree with that. Like that is kind of my issue with some of the conversations around is it transphobic for da 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 da. Do I think it's transphobic for you to reject a trans person? Not necessarily. But if all your videos or if all your content is, oh my God, trans people are so gross, stop forcing us to have sex with them, stop trying to rape us with your transgender bodies, I do think you're a little transphobic. I don't think rejecting them is inherently, but I definitely think that when you can't shut up about you not like, I think, yes, then that then becomes transphobic. But yeah. Cis people frame this conversation about trans attraction as personal preference because they don't possess the capability of analyzing their personal failures. Yeah, but if a gay guy does 100 videos on how he can't fuck women alone, doesn't make him misogynistic. I mean, the thought process is different. Huh. Okay, what else? I'm FTM, and I've made the experience that while people see trans women in this certain super sexual way, they see trans men as children or I don't know, sexless beings. I believe a lot of that is unconscious. Is unconscious. Is subconscious? Subconscious? Or unconscious? I don't know. I'm not. I just woke up. Um. Everything seems boiled down to genitalia. See, I don't know. See, a lot of straight men love dick. I'm just gonna put that out there. I don't get it personally, but a lot of straight men love dick. Um, I don't get it. I'm not talking about my body. I'm just saying, have a conversation with a straight guy for a full day and watch them and see how many times they mention their own penis or the penis of other people. I don't get it personally. I mean, I like dick, but I don't think I am as into dick as straight men are. I don't. I love dick. Like I said in every broadcast, I got a fucking box full of them over here. But I don't think that there's anyone who loves dick more than straight men. I really don't. I really don't. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I really don't. All right. So that all being said, I think I've said everything I need to say in this video. I talk about this way too much. We'll check back in a year. I'll have the same fucking conversation again. I think this was just really on my mind because I had gone through this experience recently where I had tried to date a guy who didn't like trans women. And do I think that makes him inherently transphobic? I don't really think so. Um, you know, I think he's a good guy. I think he just has a lot of learning and growing to do. I told him, I said, listen, there's a lot of little girls out there. There's a lot of little trans girls out there that are really into having sex with men who have no experience and don't know what the fuck they're doing. So why don't you go find one of those girls? Why don't you go find one of those girls? Fuck with them. And then maybe once you figure yourself out, come to me and we'll talk. That's really how I feel. That's dead ass how I feel. I always tell men, if you don't know if you like trans women, go fuck some of those girls out there. There's a lot of girls out there who are willing to fucking suck because you're a newbie and that's fascinating to them. And use their bodies and figure yourself out. Don't waste my fucking time. Don't waste my fucking time. You know. And he seemed like open to doing that. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, good luck. Good luck. Good luck. So Gabrielle just said, I feel like it's not a binary of transphobic or not, rather than a are you a little transphobic, mildly, etc. Da 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 da. Yeah, I think so. Because there is a difference between what a lot of people represent it as like a very innocent, oh, you know what, I'm just not into trans people, or like, oh, I'm just not into that, which is like very, I think, not really that transphobic at all. I don't feel it is, right? But then there's, oh, I don't want you to fucking rape me or coerce me into fucking you fucking transgender weirdo. And I think that's a little transphobic. But it's a lot of people like to represent that type of rejection as the innocent, oh, I'm just not into that rejection, right? Like I was reading some of the comments on the response video, and it was like, well, Kat, you don't get to reject people because they're unattractive. In that case, bitch, I get to reject whoever the fuck I want. It's so weird to me how like these people who do these response videos don't listen to my overall argument, which was, bitch, I don't give a fuck. I'd rather be with people who like trans people. That's why I don't watch response videos, y'all. I don't do it. I refuse to do it. I refuse to do it. I fucking refuse to do it. Not because I'm scared. Not because, of anything. It's just I would waste my time so much watching these fucking responses. I really would. And they would really not come. They would not be productive. It would not be productive for me. How I personally feel about whether or not someone fucking me is not fucking me is transphobic or not really isn't worth debating. Honestly, I have my position. I have my perspective. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it, but it's how I fucking feel. So you can lick my taint if you disagree. Anyway, I'm gonna talk to you guys later. I think I'm gonna go. I might come back. This is this is a tapestry that you guys can buy in my store. It is called Tropical Mermaidia. And it is an illustration I did back in 2013 of a black mermaid. Isn't that so fucking cool? I actually want to buy I want to buy the more updated mermaid painting that I did and put that in here. Yeah. Anyway, I gotta go. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.